Hello, and thank you for joining me for today's episode of Your Best Unleashed. I am your host, Stephanie Jackman. Your Best Unleashed is a live broadcast that is designed to bring you relevant information and education to be able to handle everyday life challenges. It is designed to be able to help give you practical tools and tips and techniques in order for you to be able to be your best mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. So I want to thank you for taking this opportunity for joining me for today's episode. I am excited that you've joined me on today. If you are a regular viewer, welcome back. If this is your first time joining me, I'm so glad that you took the time to be with me on today. Make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as make sure that you share this broadcast with your community and hit the notification button. So today we are doing part 2 of building resiliency in our children and in our adolescents. So I am thoroughly excited because guess what? This will be a 3-part series. So for today, we are going to be looking at building blocks of resiliency for our children. In part 1 of this 3-part series, we provided you with 6 benefits of building resiliency for our children. So if you have not seen part 1 of this 3-part series, I'm going to highly recommend that you go back and view episode 1. Now, full transparency of episode 1, if you viewed it or if you haven't viewed it, we had a few technical difficulties, but I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to go back and join it, because I think what I actually did was demonstrate resiliency. Anything can happen in a live broadcast. We often talk about that on Your Best Unleashed, that nothing is perfect. No one is perfect. Life happens. And so we experienced that on our first episode of the building blocks of resiliency with children and adolescents. So I don't want that to stop you from viewing that episode and replay. Make sure you do that, because that absolutely shows the capabilities of having the skills of building resiliency. Could I have stopped? I could have, but then what would that have done with a live episode of Your Best Unleashed? So we have to push through. We have to have the ability to be able to actually bounce back when challenges and obstacles come. That's the definition of resiliency. So now we are going to actually talk about how do we build resiliency in our children. So for today's episode, we are going to look at and highlight children and preteens. How do we build resiliency in that population? So this episode is for parents and guardians, aunts and uncles, godparents, foster parents, bonus parents, adoptive parents, educators. It's for all of you out there that have wonderful children and preteens in your lives. So let's jump right to it, because I promised you in episode 1 that we were going to come back in episode 2 and give you practical skills and practical tips and strategies as parents and caregivers on how to be able to help build resiliency in our children. So let's jump right into it. All right. So I am going to give you 5 tips and 5 strategies, basically techniques, to be able to help you build that resiliency. So when we're talking about building resiliency, we're really talking about building blocks. Okay? These things are going to build off of each other for our children and our preteens. So first, Let's get to technique number one. Let's get to strategy number one. The first thing when we're talking about building resiliency, again, the ability to be able to bounce back with challenges and obstacles come our way. The first one is, as parents and caregivers and guardians, we have to one, lead by example. So, what does that mean? Show our children, what are we showing our children and our adolescents in terms of how do we deal and how do we cope when there's obstacles and challenges in our way? That could be any day, that could be every day of life. So, how do we cope? How do we manage that? Are we angry? Are we frustrated? Those are all natural feelings and emotions, but how do we then bounce back? How do we regroup? So, what are we modeling for our children in our lives, for our preteens in our lives? I have a saying, we live what we learn. So, whatever we're showing our children and our preteens in terms of how to help overcome some challenges and obstacles in life, that's what they're going to then live out as well. So it's key and critical that we're modeling appropriate behavior and we're modeling problem solving skills for our children and our preteens. Now, it's key and critical to remember we're really talking about age appropriate coping strategies and coping techniques for children. So, what a high schooler or a middle schooler would do in terms of age appropriate coping skills is going to look totally different than what our preschooler or what our preteen may do. So, again, for the context of your best unleash, we're really talking about age appropriate coping skills and resiliency skills. So, that is the first one. Number one, lead by example as parents and as guardians. All right, we are already at number two. Number two, when we're looking at elementary kids and preschoolers, role play with your child. I can't tell you enough. Kids love role playing. Our children learn by doing. So it's key and critical that if we want to teach them resiliency skills, role play with them. When you hear a therapist talk about child therapy, or when we're talking about play therapy, guess what? We're role playing with your children. That's what we're doing. We have mock family settings set up, we have kitchens, we have doll houses, and we're basically role playing and acting out with the children what their experiences may have been. Well, as parents and caregivers, you can actually do the same. So, I'm going to encourage you that when you're attempting to build resiliency skills in your children and in your preteens, role play with them. You can actually do it and they'll have a blast around it. All right. Because again, we learn and our children learn by doing. So it will allow them through role playing to be able to learn how to handle frustrating situations. For children and for preteens, some frustrating situations can be learning how to wait. It can be learning how to take turns. This is a big one. This is a big one that my husband and I often talk about. Learning to lose is really key for children. So when they're dealing with and when they're team members of formalized teams, so soccer teams and t-ball teams and basketball teams, it is key and critical that we're teaching our children how to lose because they're not always going to win. So through role plays and through activities and through games, we can show them how to lose and how to be a good sport in losing. So that is point number two. That's tip number two is role playing with our children. role playing with our preteens so that they can learn by doing. This is all to be able to help them learn the building blocks to increase their resiliency and the ability to be able to bounce back. All right, we are at tip number 3. Tip number 3. This is a great one. Encourage and practice delayed gratification. We are living in a society, particularly our children, but us as well as adults, we're living in a society to where we don't want to wait. We want it and we want it now. I'll be the first one to raise my hand. I'm certainly guilty of that in some instances. We want it now. So, how do you teach your children to be able to wait, to be able to wait for privileges and being able to wait for rewards? How do you do that? Some of you are asking. Stephanie, it sounds good, but how? Well, I'm going to give you several ways of how you can teach your children and your preteens how to delay gratification because nothing in life comes instantly. So, how do we delay gratification? Parents and guardians, let's start small and let's start early. So, it's never too early for us to be able to teach a child the ability of delayed gratification. In other words, waiting. So 3 years old, it's not too early to teach a toddler. Even in those terrible twos, it's not too early to be able to teach our children how to wait. So start small and start early. I'll give you an example. Have them learn how to wait when someone else is talking. Not only is that a skill for our children, as children, but that will carry them a long way, even in their adulthood, even in their teen years. So, teaching them how to wait when someone else is talking, saying things and teaching them things like, excuse me, that is key and critical in the preteens and the childhood ages of and stages of development. So, teaching them how to wait until someone else is done speaking. Also, having them learn to take turns in a game. Games are really amazing ways to be able to teach children how to practice delayed gratification. Next, as they get older, one of the things that you can do in order to be able to teach them delayed gratification is explain the difference to children and preteens, the difference between a want and a need. Okay, so there are some things that we need in order to live life on a daily basis: food, clothes, shelter. Those are needs. Some of the other things that our children may desire, those are wants. Things like sneakers and things like Xboxes and video games and allowances. All of those things are wants. So at an early age, we can teach our children, and particularly our preteens, the difference between a want and a need. That's teaching them skills around practicing delayed gratification. Also, with our preteens, it is key and critical that we can teach them to earn money towards things that they desire. That's a skill, again, that will help them as they're moving through their teenage years as well as in adulthood. So, teach them to earn money. How do you earn money to save so that you can then be able to purchase what it is that you want? That's teaching them delayed gratification, as opposed to them being able to say to us as parents and guardians, can I have $25? I want. Can I have $150 because I want? But teaching them delayed gratification would be able to say something of the sorts around, well, how about you earn that $25? How about you earn that pair of $200 sneakers? That is a way to be able to teach them delayed gratification. And then lastly, again, encouraging and practicing delayed gratification. Speak with your children and preteens and explain to them goal setting. That is key and critical. Understanding and teaching our children short term goals and long term goals. How do you move and work towards short term goals? Short term goals, again, is based upon age. So, short term for a 3-year-old may be a day. Short term for a preteen, someone that's 10 or 11, may be 4 days. That's short term. Long term goals for preteens. It may be 2 weeks. It may be a month. It may be 6 weeks. It may be between now and September or August when they're going back to school, depending on your geographical location. So, again, age appropriate coping skills and coping mechanisms can definitely help build resiliency in our children and our preteens. So that's point number 3 in terms of encouraging and practicing delayed gratification. Believe it or not, we are up to point and tip number 4 already. So, point and tip number 4, make waiting fun. Again, that is building off of encouraging and practicing delayed gratification. So now that we're looking at delayed gratification, we want to make waiting fun. And waiting isn't always easy. It's not easy for us as adults if we're honest with each other. But teaching our children and our preteens how to wait demonstrates discipline, and it also teaches them patience. Those are skills that they're going to be able to need indefinitely for the rest of their lives through their stages of development. So make waiting fun. How do we do that? Turn waiting into a game, right? Turn it into a game. Make it fun. You can use fun activities, again, like actually playing a game. So if you have a game and you have 4 participants playing in the game, each person then has to wait their turn. But there's this degree of anticipation that comes when your turn rolls around. That's making fun. That's making waiting fun. You can also make waiting fun through, again, playing games and having activities such as when you're driving in the car. I know a lot of families, they will play I Spy games. So you're driving in the car as a parent and your kids are in the back seat and you might have a long trip that you're taking. So you play games like I Spy. I spy a green truck. I spy a car with 3 people in it. I spy. So you're making it fun so that you're helping them be able to create healthy distractions for themselves, which doesn't always resort back to the phone. So it's key and critical, parents, that we're teaching our children how to be resilient and cope in the real world, not on video games, not through social media, right? Through real life as opposed to the virtual and the social media world. So these are all building blocks and tips to be able to help our children cope in real life. I meet with a lot of children and a lot of families, and their children spend a lot of time with video games and in the virtual world. But they struggle when it comes to social interactions and when it comes to real life. So again, these are all building blocks and tips for parents to be able to help build those skills of resiliency. Because what these skills will do, even with teaching, making waiting fun, it allows you to be able to help your child learn how to self regulate and self soothe themselves while they have to wait. So if they're in the doctor's office and they're in the lobby and they have to wait, they're then able to learn how to self-regulate, and they're not pacing, they're not anxious, they're not nagging you. They don't always have to be on the phone. They don't always have to be distracted. They can actually sit in the chair based upon, again, age appropriate, and they can sit and they can soothe themselves. Or they can be in the pediatrician's office and they can interact age appropriately with other children and learn how to interact and play, or even parallel play, meaning they don't have to interact and actually play with the other children in the room with them, but they can actually play alongside them in a healthy manner. So that is tip number 4 around helping to build resiliency in our children and our preteens, making waiting fun. All right, lastly, tip number 5 is teach time management skills. Yes, you can teach time management skills to children, to toddlers. We can teach time management skills. So we're going to be looking at, how do you teach time management skills to preteens when they're in their own world? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of tips, all right? Help them learn how to prioritize what is important in this particular time. Okay, so what's the priority right now? Many children are often overbooked. Their schedules are busy. So they have school, they have social clubs, they have formalized teams that they're on, they have family time, all of those things. And so their schedules can be very, very busy. So it's key and critical from an early onset. How can we teach them time management skills? All right, here's a couple of tips for you. What needs to be done first? So again, what's the priority? What needs to be done first? And these time management skills are also applicable to us as adults, okay? So what needs to be done first? Is it your chores that needs to be done first? And then you can go and play outside, or you can go and play video games, or you can hang out with your friends. So what is the priority? Is the priority that your homework needs to get done? And then you can have some free time. Next, what may take you the longest? So look at the things that may be on your preteen's calendar or schedule, or even their homework assignments. What will take you the longest? If it's math that you struggle with, perhaps we need to look at doing the math segment of your homework before we actually then do the subject that you just excel in. So if you struggle with math, if your child is struggling with math, we need to do that one first, because perhaps that one's going to take the most time, and we want to make sure that we're the sharpest, because as the evening proceeds, we get a little tired, but you can fly through English, you can fly through global studies. Let's do the math first, because that may take us the longest, because that's where she or he may struggle the most. All right? Use timers. There's nothing wrong with using timers to be able to help assist in terms of managing time. This is great tool for younger children, and it's a great tool for preteens as well. So use a timer. Use the timer or the stopwatch on your phone, on your microwaves or your ranges. Use that in terms of, okay, I'm giving you 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes to be able to do A, B, and C. That then helps them with the next point of using the timers to be able to assist in terms of transition, right? So give them timers and give them verbal cues. All right, we have 5 minutes left, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. Or perhaps for children that may be struggling in terms of we're in the store, we're in the department store, we're in the large retail store, and they don't want to leave. It's key and critical as parents that we give them verbal cues. All right, we're going to go down aisle 5, we're going to go down aisle 4, and then we're going to transition and move over to the checkout. So we're going to be in here for about 10 minutes because all mom has to do is pick up some paper towel and some toilet paper. So about 10 minutes we're going to be in here, and then we're going to be leaving, and then we're going to be heading home. So those are verbal cues to be able to help with transitions around time management. So we're not all over the place in the stores. And then lastly, we're at home. All right. You can give verbal cues and verbal tips to be able to help with transitions. You can even do it the night before. We're going to be leaving home tomorrow in the morning for church. We're leaving at 9:15. Believe it or not, we practice that one in our house. Can we get to church? Can we leave by 9:15? Can we leave by 9:20? All right. So using those verbal cues and those verbal prompts to be able to help with time management so that you'll have an opportunity ahead of time to be able to prepare, and so that you're preparing to be able to successfully leave in that scheduled amount of time. So these 5 tips and strategies that I've given you to be able to help build resiliency for your children to be able to bounce back. They're just practical, everyday tips and strategies to be able to help in terms of building a foundation for the building blocks in order for our children and our preteens to be successful. Right? So these are foundational skills and foundational tips, because what will actually happen is that if we can help our children be able to master kind of these 5 tips and these 5 strategies as they move forward into their teenage years and their young adulthood, they'll have the significant foundation to be able to be resilient and be able to bounce back through life's challenges and obstacles. So, I promised you that this was going to be a 3-part series. So, guess what? You have to make sure that you join me in our next episode of Your Best Unleash, where we will then be talking with parents and caregivers and educators around how do you help those teenagers, right? So I'm going to give you again some practical tips and practical strategies to be able to help our teenagers in terms of building resiliency to be able to cope and manage life. This has been an episode of Your Best Unleash, where our goal and our desire is to be able to help provide you with practical skills and tips and strategies so that you can be your best, and so that we can help anchor you to be the best physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. I want to thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules for joining me for this episode of Your Best Unleashed. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and share this information with your communities. And I look forward to you joining us on the next episode, where we're going to talk about building blocks of resiliency for our teenagers. Thank you so much, and make it a great day.